Hello and welcome to After Scientology, Straight Up and Vertical, the weekly show where Tony Ortega and I cover the week's events in the world of Scientology as reported on Tony's blog in the last week on his Substack. Hey, Tony, welcome to the show.
Chris, thank you very much. I always enjoy talking with you about Scientology news. It's just really, really a good time.
It actually is. I do enjoy doing this every week with you. Now, you had some interesting stories posted, as I have written down here. The first one I wanted to bring up was the no Chicago or Austin ideal org openings. It appears that has been pushed forward. Not necessarily the first time that's happened, but I see it as a bit of a red flag. Thoughts?
Well, that's interesting that you say it that way. I mean, to me, because we often see stories pop up in the press about how this building is rotting away and that building is rotting away and they're not paying their fines here or there, and I always say, look, it all goes back to the same issue, and that is it's all based on David Miscavige's schedule and when he wants to show up in a city and put on a show. And so it doesn't surprise me that some of these buildings are bought and sit empty for 10 years because it's just, it's up to him. But what's interesting about Austin and Chicago in particular is that they were ready to go when the pandemic hit. And so that got put on hold. But now there's no more excuse about that. So why isn't Dave? Because at the beginning of the year, he announced that they were going to have 4 new ideal orgs open in the first quarter of the year. That's long gone. We're almost at the halfway point in the year.
Yeah.
So something's keeping him. What is keeping him from going? They're ready to go. All they got to do is put that big ribbon out in the front, organize, the things they normally do, and they can have these. If you remember a few years ago before the pandemic, there was actually a weekend when he opened 2, one on Saturday and one on Sunday. I think that was Columbus and Kansas City, right? So, I mean, he could do that. He could do that with this. He could be in, Austin one day and Chicago the next. But for some reason, he's not doing it. I'm hearing several different suggestions for why not. And you probably have a better handle on which ones make sense. Several people are pointing out maybe it's a staffing problem, that he just, he makes a big deal about not only are these larger, they have facilities with a lot of screens and stuff for showing people videos and things like that, but they're really nicely done. I mean, they have an outside firm that comes in and it does the architecture and everything. But according to David Miscavige, it needs a certain base staff amount that's very large.
That's right.
And so people are suggesting to me Scientology's in such a poor state right now, he can't put together the staff to open these places. Now, let me ask you this, because I feel like that's kind of an excuse, because couldn't he just bus in a bunch of people just to put on a show? He knows these things go dead after that. Is it really an issue that should we think that maybe the staffing issue is a real sign of trouble for Scientology?
I actually think that could be a legit reason. Having worked directly on Ideal Org Man Up for the last, about 5 years of my Sea Org existence, that was a huge problem. And and mechanically speaking, just logistically speaking, we would move people from one place of the United States to the other on need, right? Depending on the fact we're going to have Las Vegas. Now we're going to do Las Vegas. So all resources are on Las Vegas. Then we're going to do Kansas City. Good. All resources on Kansas City. And that doesn't mean the same staff are moving from one place to another, but the Sea Org missions and all the allocation and all the work is being done on that place. And it's rip and run. It's get people from anywhere. I was driving staff from Twin Cities out to Las Vegas, or from Seattle to Las Vegas. And that was my daily work for a couple of years. But it's only got as much sustainability as you can move people around. And they're losing people through CIVs now, to the point that maybe they can't do that Kansas City shuffle anymore, of this, move from here to here, right? It doesn't work anymore. And,
right.
And so then the other option becomes send the Sea Org in, like they did with Ohio. Well, maybe they used up all the Sea Org they've got now too, as far as being able to move people around. It's a legit logistical problem for Scientology if its numbers are shrinking, and we have every reason to believe that they are. So I could see that.
Well, then what's interesting then, if that's the situation that they're having such a hard time that even though Chicago and Austin are finished, which means they've poured millions into those
Yeah.
places,
Yeah.
then you then look at how they're raising money everywhere else though. Long Island, Hawaii, Battle Creek, Toronto, Vancouver, Winnipeg. You
Mm-hmm.
know, the question arises, does Dave know he'll never be able to staff those places, but he wants them to raise the money anyway?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Because the entire attitude in the Sea Org at every level, and you got to see it to believe it, you got to live it to really get it, but it is fuck tomorrow. We're making it go right now. And just make it go right. And I just don't even want to hear about it. We'll solve that problem when we get to it, would be the attitude of middle and upper management to the problem of Long Island and the other organizations right now. Absolutely. It also bears repeating, just because I love knowing this, that having been to the Austin current facilities that they're using, it is literally an ideal morgue across the street from a cemetery. That's where they're located right now, waiting, and they've been there for years now while they're waiting to get into this new building. So I find that hilarious personally, so I just have to comment on that. Servicing the dead. Okay, now this letter, this other article that came up was a little disturbing. This letter that was found outside the Flag land base, and I wanted to comment on this, but can you tell what the deal was with that one?
Sure. I heard from a guy I've heard from a few times before, don't know him real well, that he had found a note on the ground on the south side of the Flag building, also known as the Superpower building.
Mm-hmm.
And he thought I'd be interested in it. Now, I went ahead and pointed out that this guy is not uncontroversial. Okay. He's an outspoken local political gadfly there in Clearwater. He was actually arrested at one point for making what appeared to be sort of a threat against a congressman. And I pointed that out just because I didn't want people thinking I was hiding anything, because even though this person has that background, the documents he seemed to be holding looked authentic and weren't something that I think he really would have the capability to fake.
Okay.
He actually ended up handing them to Mark Bunker, and then Bunker and I examined them to try to get a sense of what they were. And it looked like a handwritten CSW,
right,
which stands for completed staff work, which I know you guys would have to submit whenever you wanted to request something.
That's right.
And it was a call for help. It was a woman. I can say I held back her name, but I can tell you, Chris, that I looked into her and it looks like she's a grandmother from the Midwest. And she's an outer org trainee. So she joined staff at an org in the Midwest somewhere, and they sent her to Flag to get this special training so that she'd have the technology that she could take back to her org. And I guess while she's there at Flag, it's very, very grueling, because what she described in her note was that she was dehydrated, she was dizzy. When they were doing Chinese school, she was turning green. And then Karen De La Carriere gave me a nice definition of what Chinese school is. That's when everybody gets together and says in unison stuff about, Hubbard's code of a Scientologist or
That's
whatever,
right.
basically reciting things in unison. And that she was practically falling off her feet doing that. And what this note appeared to be was she was simply asking for the afternoon off so she could go back to her room and get some rest. And at the bottom, you sign, it's approve and disapprove, and it's just app or disapp, and it's blank. So we don't know whether this was approved or disapproved. We don't know why it was on the ground, but it appears to be an authentic note from this outer org trainee at the Flag land base who describes some fairly troubling symptoms. I actually heard from some people with some medical background that said that actually what she was describing was really kind of serious. And this was a woman that really needed some medical attention. And we don't know if she got it. We don't know. But I published it because to me, it echoed everything we've heard from people that have been in the Sea Org like you. And also, there's always the question, okay, Chris Shelton tells us about what it was like at a certain time. Mike Rinder tells us about what about right now?
Right.
And that's why I felt like, okay, here's a note that was literally written last week, which seems to evoke all of the Sea Org conditions we've heard about. What was your reaction when you saw it?
Absolutely the exact same, that nothing's changed as far as the outer org trainees go at Flag. And for the Flag crew, the entire, body of people who are there. Florida is not a kind environment. It's hot, it's humid, it's sweaty. It's, it's a place that you really need to take care of yourself, especially with the grueling hours that the Sea Org and the staff out there put in. They are not petty, weak hours. Those people are working, 18-hour days, a lot. So, water, minerals, salt intake, these are really, they become very, very important things for that group of people, especially. And having had, I can speak to years of experience overseeing getting people to Flag for training and watching and sort of monitoring their progress out there. And it's, it was always just such an ordeal for people out there. Always. Nobody wanted to be there. They just wanted to get there, get the training, and get home. And yet Flag would keep them for years of time. It was ridiculous how long trainees would spend there for what ostensibly should have been a months-long program, over and over and over again. And so the staff who come from the outer orgs have it the worst because they're not Sea Org, but they're in a Sea Org environment and they're treated like Sea Org. So it's like a crash course in being a Sea Org member. And if I remember right, there was also a story that these trainees were, or maybe still are, on a night schedule where it's reversed, where they're studying during the wee hours of the morning as their daytime, and then sleeping during the day, which throws your body off 10 times harder as far as study and sleep and rest go. That's real stuff. That's biology. And so that's not a good idea to put the entire outdoor training program on a nighttime schedule, especially if they're old. So that's another aspect that could be at play here. And I thought of all of this stuff when I read your article, and I was like, holy shit, man. It's always worse than you think.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Well, we don't know if she got that day off. We don't know if she got the medical care. I'm glad. I'm glad this person went to Mark Bunker.
Mm-hmm.
I have not followed up with Mark yet, but I have a feeling he probably showed it to some city officials to kind of, get some, maybe they looked into it. But it was just like, oh, they're still doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. I'll tell you one other thing that I'm happy about with this leak or discovery was that it really does keep them on alert that we're watching them. We're paying attention. That's not insignificant. That matters inside as to the conditions that go on in there. It could, when they know they have eyes on them is when they're on their best behavior. So, all right. Now you had 2 or 3 interesting interviews, articles, podcast with some guests, Christian Stoltz, Pete Griffiths, and the Damien Perkins. Do you want to speak to those?
Sure. Yeah. So Damien Perkins is somebody I have wanted to tell the world about for so long.
Yeah.
This guy, I mean, he has been so patient. He has gone through so much harassment and intimidation. This is the guy who helped put the Jane Does together.
Yeah.
And that's how the case got, because from the trial, we learned that these women had been attacked by Masterson, but they didn't know that there was more than one victim. Well, Damien Perkins helped make that happen.
Right.
And then he was also there the night when Jane Doe 1 was attacked. And so he's the only percipient witness other than Masterson and the 3 women. And he suffered really serious harassment, and some of it was going to be evidence in the case. And I really wanted to talk about that. I've held back on that for years. And also, I just, Damien he's an actor and a dancer, and he's a very sensitive guy. I mean, Chris, there were nights when I was just trying to talk him through because he was so freaked out. There were
Mm.
people coming on his property. There were people knocking on the door. There were people following his daughter. And, and he lost a son. This is something I didn't talk about in the story. We don't really think Scientology was connected to it. But in the middle of all this harassment, he lost his son. And you can't help thinking that's, I mean, it just added to the burden of
Oh
what
my God.
he's been going through.
Oh my God.
So I just wanted people to understand what a sweet, sensitive guy this guy, and he's hung in there all these years, and then they didn't call him, and we're not sure why, but he wasn't bitter about it at all. He was so thrilled when the verdicts came down and that his friends, the Jane Does, were going to get justice. And at that point, he said to me, "Okay, Tony, let's do the story." And so I just tried my best to capture a sense of him. I just want people to understand, look, these women and their bravery and they're going to the LAPD. That's why Danny Masterson is going to prison.
Yep.
And that's why Scientology was exposed so brutally in these trials. But Damian Perkins did have a role, and I wanted people to know about it. And, I think he's just a really remarkable person that he's been able to put up with this all this time. And he's going to be helping out in the civil case. And, the most remarkable part of the whole story is that OSA literally sent this guy to intimidate him. And when he told the LAPD said, "Damien, call the guy back up and tape it this time." Mm-hmm. And he did. And so they had this guy on tape acknowledging, "Yeah, I'm delivering a message from OSA." That's why they called him in the first trial. They did not put him on the stand, this guy Geisler. But that testimony could be crucial to the civil case. I think that Geisler guy is going to be deposed. That tape's going to be entered as evidence, and it's going to be key evidence that Scientology has tried to intimidate witnesses to try to wreck this case. And that's exactly what that civil case is about. So wow. Damien's right there with them. He wants to help out with that. And so I'm just really glad I finally got to tell that story. And he's very glad too. He was really thrilled with the story.
Awesome. I had no idea. I read the story. I was like, who, what, how, where? So I was absolutely intrigued by this. And to see, of course, the classic OSA shenanigans, the real hard stuff, the calling and intimidating and indirect threats. And I'm just protecting you, by intimidating you. And this whole protection racket aspect of it was, of course, exactly like we've, talked about how mafia-like this outfit is. Same damn tactics.
Right. If you keep your mouth shut, OSA won't release the Kraken.
Yes.
That's what the guy literally said to him.
Believe that crap? I mean, and of course, everybody who is anybody in Scientology for any length of time completely understands what they're talking about. And and it's really bizarre as a Scientologist, again, kind of speaking from experience, how you just can kind of know or suspect or sort of be perceived that that's over there. But it's never directed at you, and you never once think it would be. You're so sure that you are a good Scientologist, towing the line, doing your thing, cooperating, paying your money, and that thing over there, that bulldog, pit bull, whatever in the corner, isn't ever going to growl at you. But then you find a couple times you get a little closer to it and does start growling, and then people like Damien, it goes for the throat. And boy, is that a weird position to be in. And people have no idea how they would react to that or deal with that until it's happening to them. And Damien and people who persevere through that, like the JDs, are truly engaging in heroic actions, fighting back against that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They all went through a brutal time, and it hasn't all come out yet. What these women have been through, we're going to find out more about that in the civil case.
Yeah.
And but Damien wanted people to know a little bit about what he's gone through, and he was really happy for that piece.
Yeah, awesome.
The next day I did have a wonderful conversation with Christian Stolte. He plays Mouch on Chicago Fire. He's been on that series for 11 years. and he's a great friend of the Underground Bunker. He performed a song at HowdyCon Chicago in
Yeah,
2018.
that's right. I was there
He
for
is
that.
he and I the reason I thought about talking to him was that after the Masterson verdict, there was some. I got a question from a few people like, now what happens to his? I mean, obviously Danny's career is over, but what happens to Christopher, his brother, and Jordan, his brother, and Alana, his sister? Um, Now, does it get tougher for them to have jobs? And I heard things on both, both directions. Some people say, no, it won't affect them at all. Some say, yeah, their career's over. So I just thought I'd ask a real professional. And so we talked about that. But mainly, he talked about his Scientology story, which he has done before, but this was the first time on video with me. And I just thought the way he tells that story is wonderful. And he did run into some disconnection, and he ran into some, things that I'm sure were familiar to you. But just a wonderful, wonderful guy. And I'm so glad he's been a loyal reader of the Bunker for many years now.
Oh yeah, and he's awesome. I met him at that HowdyCon, and nicest guy. He was so funny because we both look at each other and went, "I saw you on TV," which was really fun to hear from a professional actor because I'm just some lowly YouTuber, right? So it's pretty funny.
Right.
Okay, good. And then I think the last thing I wanted to just sort of comment on quickly was you dropped another article about yet another fundraiser and their big long banner of glory that they do, laying out of the, all the nonsense that they do. And it's such a patterned fill in the blanks kind of operation at this point, over and over. It's the same damn thing. They just change the pictures and change the monetary amounts. I mean, when you say Scientology is boring, as far as that goes, I have to agree with you. It is amazing that Scientologists still go to those things and throw their money at this stuff.
Well, like we were saying before, it's like they can't even open the ones they've paid for. Why are they raising money for even more? Right. What do they think is going to happen? And also, it's I just think it's cruel the way that the landlord's office and David Miscavige keeps putting the pressure on by saying, look, we're starting a new civilization. Mm-hmm. This is, you need to sacrifice because this is for the world. And then, okay, they open these nice looking buildings and then nobody goes to them.
That's right.
I mean, couldn't you at least show some success in Portland and Phoenix and the Twin Cities? Mm-hmm. But they can't. They don't, and so they're just blindly going ahead. And that was an interesting one because Jim Meskimen, he's kind of like their most loyal celebrity who will get his, he will get in there and do the hard work. And he actually showed up to this thing, probably online, and was imitating some Canadian sportscaster or something. Canadians will know what I'm talking about. But anyway, I don't know. They just seem so ridiculous, these fundraisers, but people are giving real money.
They are. It's, I had to, out of morbid curiosity, somebody pointed out to me that the Twin Cities had a Destination Scientology video on the Scientology TV channel, which is not something I go look at. But this I went and looked at because I'm so intimately familiar with Twin Cities. And there was, Bob Walker, and there was his daughter-in-law, Caitlin, narrating the entire video. And there was his son, Alex. And I know these people. I worked with these people. He's the big whale there, this guy who was speaking in the video. But his daughter-in-law was the one doing most of the talking because she's the cutest in the family. And I just couldn't believe the things they were saying, knowing what we all know, that all the big shots of all the course rooms being full were all just PR photo ops. They were not real at all. This place is a ghost town all the time. We've had so many people go by this, 90,000 square foot building and talk about how nobody's in it. That we know this is true. And here's the Scientology PR. Yeah. So even after the fact, the people who have bought and paid for it and the people who are working in it still buy into this whole delusory view and are willing to say so on camera. It is truly mind-boggling, that level of commitment to a clearly lost cause. What can you say?
I mean, this is what happens when you're basically grifting and bilking people,
Yep.
but you have them so indoctrinated that they would never complain about being victimized.
Exactly.
And you know, and then of course they're Scientologists, so if they ever do feel badly, they blame themselves.
That's right.
And the ultimate example I think about is Ned McCrink, who was the single biggest donor to the Orange County Ideal Org.
Right.
I think he gave $1 million or something like that. And then he went to it after it had been open for a while. And he was like, and decided, you know, he was excited. He was going to take a course at the building he helped build. And there were two other students in the whole building.
That's right.
And he was like, hey, wait a minute. This was supposed to produce this rush. I'm one of 3 students in the whole building. And because he raised that issue, they barred him from the building he helped pay for.
Yep.
I don't think he ever. I don't think he ever got out of that. He got over that. He got out of Scientology. He was always conflicted about leaving. We would talk about it. He would tell me about how he was still wrestling with, yeah, but doesn't this work? Why doesn't that? And he took his life. Oh, and I think it was directly related to the fact that he could never get over the betrayal that, you know, he had given that money because he truly believed he was making an improvement on civilization, and he was help building this cathedral that was going to change society. And then he went inside and realized it was all it was nonsense.
That's right.
I think that's really hard for Scientologists to deal with. They have a hard time seeing what's right in front of their very eyes.
Well, that's right. And you see and actually, if anything, that tells you, you know, the tragedy of Ned's story is that it tells you the depths to which, you know, Scientology is playing with people's psyches and their emotional needs. I mean, these are deep, deep things. I can speak to the depths of that from my own experience too, and the suicidal ideation that can result, and the betrayal and the anger and the loss of purpose and meaning. It is unreal. It's impossible. I've still 10 years out. I don't have the words for the betrayal. Those are just the only words you can use. Is I was angry. I felt betrayed. But it doesn't even come close to, you know, trying to explain that iceberg that exists under the water of all of that. You know what I mean? It's huge.
Right.
So that's the awfulness of this. That's why we say destructive cults. This isn't just some stupid thing or some humorous thing. It ruins people's lives permanently. So, yuck, yuck, yuck. Well, that all. Well,
ended the week on kind of a fun note, though, Chris.
Yeah.
Let's finish with something fun, and that was that. I learned that there's an independent Scientologist who's running for city council in Seattle.
Yes.
And I made a note of that because it's not that often that you see a Scientologist on the ballot. And this is an indie. This is somebody who is no longer in the Church of Scientology, but they consider themselves still Scientologists. And how I found out about that was that Ray Robles, the very colorful Free Zone figure, has put out a flyer. Announcing that his Theta Alliance annual convention is back after being off for the pandemic. And he listed 3 featured speakers, himself, of course, and he lists himself as OT9, which is wonderful. And then there's Trey Lotz, who, you know, he's this, you know, kind of a legendary figure in the independent field. Everybody talks about how Trey Lotz is the best auditor and all that.
Yeah.
His endorsement is why I think LRH 2.0 Justin Craig managed to get a following several years ago. Yeah, okay. Trey said that. Yeah, this is the reincarnated Hubbard, and and then the third featured speaker is this woman Victoria Palmer, and Ray's description of her said that she's now running for city council in Seattle. So that made me very interested, and I went and looked, and sure enough, she has a campaign website. She is listed as an official candidate. The local press has covered her. And what she's known for up there is activists against mask mandates during the pandemic. And there's still, obviously, people still have feelings about that whole period in 2021 and all that. So she's running kind of on that platform of about with vaccines and stuff. So, but nothing at her website about being an OT3 Scientologist. So,
independent Scientologist, much less.
Right. So
Wow.
I sent her an email with some detailed questions about that, but I haven't heard back, Chris. But I hope I do. I'd love to do a follow up with her.
Yeah, for sure. That'll be interesting to see what happens on that. That's the first time I've ever heard of an indie going for a government office at any level. So, hey, civic duty, rocket. I wish you could wake up on the Scientology stuff.
I think you're
you know,
right. I can't remember another indie running for office
never heard of it. No,
unless there were maybe some city officials or something who were quiet. I don't know. You might be right. This might be the very first time.
yeah, we'll have to see.
I'm not sure she has much of a chance against this incumbent,
Right,
but it'll be interesting to see if any of the local press there picks up on my piece and starts asking her about that.
right.
Yeah, it's look, as I said, look, if Scientology worked, no OT who ran for office should lose.
Good point. Good point, because they could just either theta it or audit the BTs to deal with all of the counter intention they are receiving and problems to their campaign. If only. I just to be honest, I'll tell you, I at times I wish it was that simple and it did work, because wow, the world would be my oyster. All right. That all being said, thanks, Tony,
You bet.
for everything this week. Folks out there, subscribe to Tony's Substack so you get the notifications on his stories every single day. The address is, as you can see there on the screen. And of course, if you're not subscribed to my show or sharing this around, please do both. I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.